Hello, this video is about how to use the MVC pattern with both using properties and observable list and doing it all in JavaFX. I'm going to be using IntelliJ for this as usual, and I'm using the Liberica JDK library because it has the JavaFX built-in, so it's so much easier to set up, and I made a video on that. So if you don't know how to start out, you can watch that video. I'll put a link in the description. So first off, I start up with a project that I made beforehand, and if I click run, we should see that the program is running. So right now I only have this window and I have a button where I can say click me and it says it's alive. So it's working and everything is good. So I want to divide this into different things. So I want to divide it into something like I want to have a model, I want to have a view, and I want to have a controller. The two of them, like the view and the controller, are pretty easy because I already kind of put them there because they're kind of part of the way that JavaFX works. So you can do without view controller, but I think it's almost always the best option instead of doing everything in code. So let me show you. So the view is in JavaFX, I put it here under resources. It's what's called an fxml file, and in here everything is described on what the view should look like. If we go to the controller, it looks like that. It's pretty simple. There's a simple method here called clickButton, and that is triggered whenever I click something. You can see that as an action here. On the button, it says on action, click the button. So this is basically, so this is the view part, and in the MVC model, like this, when someone clicks the view, it sends a message to the controller, and what I do in the controller here is I simply just update the label that's inside of here saying it's alive. And that label is automatically injected into the controller by the view. So because I annotated here with fxml, I can make it private. Sorry. And if it just has the same name as inside of the fxml file, it's going to get in there automatically. So it looks for the fx ID and it tries to inject that into the controller if the controller has something with the same name here. So that's the basics of how the controller actually gets notified from the view. So it's actually the view doing all the work, and the controller here is setting the text. But this is a very simple example. Sometimes we have something a bit more complicated. So for this video, what I would like to do is I would like the controller to actually talk to something called a model, but I need to explain first what it is I want to build. So if I just change my color to like this, so if I want to build something like, let's say I want to have a program that looks like this, and inside of that program I want to have a list over here, and inside of that list I want to have some names of different persons. So this guy could be Anders, Peter, and so forth. So I have names here. And also what I want to have a button here that when I click this button, I want to change the name of this guy here, change that from Peter to something else like Petter, like a different spelling of the same name. So how are we going to do that? So first off, we need to put the list there. So let's open that fxml file up. So what I'm going to do is open the file up, right click it, and open it up in Scene Builder. So it will take a couple of seconds to start up. So now I have that here. I have a label. We can see over here I have a label and I have a button. So what I want here, I want to have something called a ListView. So I will take and type list in here in the library, put the ListView, and just drag it in here. And I want to move the label a bit. Oops, got the wrong one. Let me just see the label. I don't know. Can I move it without moving everything else? Maybe just move this first and then I can move the label. I'll just put the label up here. Maybe I'll need it for later for doing something. And I'll take the list because that's what I want to be the biggest part here. I'll just resize it. Nice. So now I have room for a lot of stuff here. And I still have my click button and it's already set up. If we look at the code, we can see it's set up to run the click btn method on the controller. And we have set up the ID for the label. So I just want to set the FX ID for this. So I'm going to call it LST names to say it's a list of names, right? I have to click somewhere else before I save that. That's how it works in Scene Builder. I press Control S, or you can go here and save. Now I just did, and then I can just quit Scene Builder. We can even go in here and see that now there's also like a list view in here, and it has a list of names and also the layout and everything. But that's not the point right now. So what we need to do is we can add that list view here as an fxml annotation. We can do that pretty easily in here. This list view, we can get this box here. Let's see. Yeah. So what I want to do is I want to use this name here in the controller. So normally we can, okay, so if I hover the FX ID here, it says it's unresolved in the controller. So if I just click create field, it automatically creates it for me in here, which is pretty cool. So one thing I like to do is just take this private and override the public part and make it private like that, because this way the controller, if it's annotated with fxml, the controller can still use the list of names. It can also, of course, if it's public, it can access it. But now other classes cannot access that. So if some other programmer by accident wanted to change this, it isn't possible now, except if he's coming from the fxml subsystem. So it's pretty cool to have this annotation, I think, because it does prevent problems from anyone else changing things they shouldn't. So now let's keep this it's alive thing that I have here, because I think it's nice to see that something is happening. So let's try to put some data into that list view. So the LST names is a list view, and inside of that you can say get items, and we can see that this returns something called an observable list. So an observable list is made so that if there's any changes to the list, it will update the view. So in other words, if we put like let's say one more person here, like if we add a person at the end of the list, it will automatically update the graphical user interface. So we will see it pop up immediately. That's something we learned to actually expect to happen, but it's not something that comes easy. Maybe not as easy as you might think. So it's actually something you need to think about. But it does come pretty easy when you use the observable list. So by getting items, this is actually the observable list for that particular list view here. So I'm going to say add, and then for the person, let's just add something like Peter, and let's add like 3 persons. Peter, Anchor, and then Luis. And instead of adding them here, I would like to add them whenever it's loaded. So, but we can test this out first to see if they actually get added to the list. So the cool thing is that when I click this now, it adds these 3 people. If I click it again, it will add 3 more people with the same names, and I can keep doing this. And this way I can fill up the list with names, which is pretty cool. But what I wanted instead, I want the list to go to be updated immediately when I start the program. So I'm going to implement an interface here called initializable, which is part of JavaFX. So it has JavaFX knows that if it's an initializable interface, it has a method that is called initialize. Maybe I should not do that before explaining it. You go up here and say implement methods, and you get this method called initialize. So you get an initialize method, and I like to put that at the top here because it's something that happens immediately after it loads everything. It's going to call this initialize method. So this is the correct place to put this. If you worked a lot with object-oriented programming, your first thought might be to use the constructor of the main controller, but you'll find out that the constructor is called before everything is ready, so you wouldn't be able to get this injected list names in the constructor. This is why we need to have this interface, because then the constructor and everything is run first. So this is actually after initializing, this is the very last thing that's going to be run. So everything is set up and ready. So this way, if we run it now, it should show these 3 names here. Okay, so if I take this guy here or anything, either if I click it or not, it doesn't matter. It just changes the text to it's alive up here. So that's it. Now we have some names inside of that list. So let's try to change this into something that we can work with in a model. So what we want to do with a model is that we want to use, when we want to use the MVC pattern, we want to have the view contacting the controller like this, and we want the controller, so the view will send things that comes from the user. So this will kind of be the events that are happening. These events are sent to the controller. The controller will then update the model, and the model will then update the view. So the arrow means that the controller doesn't know about the view, but the view knows about the controller. The controller knows about the model knows about the view. So they are dependent on each other, but not directly, in the sense that the only thing the controller needs is the model. It doesn't need the view, and the view doesn't need to know about the model as well. So this is the lowest possible coupling that we can do here while they are still working together. They need all to be connected somehow, and they are all connected like this. So how is this going to happen? So it's going to happen that what we normally want in the model, we want the data of the system to be in here, or sometimes we call this the state of the system. So this is the state of the graphical user interface. We want to save that into the model, so the controller doesn't need to know about state. It just needs to handle the different events, because the view can't do that. So it needs to handle the events and do something if something happens. That's what the controller needs to do. And oftentimes the only thing it does is updating the model. Also, the model doesn't update the view in a traditional sense, but I will show that in a second. So what I want to do, I want to move this into a model instead, so that we have the names inside of a model. So I need to create a new class, so I will do that. So this is called Java Hands-On. Let me just put them, I accidentally put them in 2 different packages. This wasn't really on purpose. I don't know, maybe my template like that. So now they are in the same package here. Okay. I want to create a new file here, new Java class, and I'm just going to call it like main model, because I'm calling it main model because we can have multiple models, any amount of models actually that we want. And what this model should have, it should hold the state of the users in this case. The data that we have in this system here, if we look at it, the data that we have in the system are really the users. There's not anything else that is state of this program. There's no state in the button. There's no state in anything other than that. The rest is just the graphical user interface. So the data is in here, and this is what we're trying to model. So how are we going to model the data? We're going to use what we already saw, something called an observable list. And in this case, we're just putting string into this observable list, and we're going to call it names. We also need to initialize this. We'll do that in the constructor of the main model. So what we can do here, we can go to generate, right click and generate, or pressing Alt Insert, and then we can make the constructor by clicking constructor. Okay. And then it automatically wants the observable list. We're not going to do that. So we're going to say that this names, we're going to create a new list from this. We cannot type new observable list like this. This is not possible because then we need to implement all of this stuff here. Not good. So there's a template for that we can use with the FS, something called FX collections. We have a template for generating that's called just observable array list, like that. So this will just create a new observable array list. It's like a factory pattern thing. So it will create everything for us. So this way, when we start out, we'll have an empty list in our main model. Also, we should always make the instance variable private, because in Java we use encapsulation for that, so there's no reason for that to be default or public or anything else like that. So now that we have the names here, I would also like to be able to actually get get the names method here. I don't want to be able to set this because I want it to be fixed, and I want to explain why later, but for now let's just create getters and setters. So again, we press Alt Insert, or we can right click and click Generate, and I say getter and setter and click OK. So it will automatically say get names and set names like that. So now we can get the list and we can set the list. And I'll keep it like that for now because we want to be able to change the list. So now I have a model, and it has state in the sense that inside of the instance of our model, we're going to save an instance of the observable list that's going to hold the names. So instead of having everything inside the GUI, the state inside the GUI, we are putting the state into the model because it makes it easier for us later. I'll show that. So now on initialize, I'm not going to add the names like that. We're going to do something a bit different. So first off, we need to have a hold of the model. So I'll create the model as an instance variable here. So I'm going to say main model, model equals new, and then main model. So this creates a new main model. And again, we remember to make the instance variable private. Also, the model, I need to connect that now to I want to connect it to the user interface. So what I basically want to do is I want to make this arrow here so that the view is automatically updated with the model. And the way I do that is by using the fact that the model has an observable list inside of it. So let me show you that. So we have the list view here. Oh, I call it LST names. So we have the list view here, and instead of using the getItems method, I'm going to use the setItems method. When we do the setItems method, we can put a reference to an observable list here that we want to use. So what I can do then, I can say model getNames, and this will actually bind the two together. So we can say it binds the list with the model. This is the arrow I talked about here. So what does that mean? If I run this code here, it doesn't actually do anything. We can't see that they're actually bound together. Okay. So I have some weird error here. I think the reason might be I need to just rebuild the project. It's probably because I changed the name. Let's see. Mm. Do I rebuild? Let's try again. Was not found exception. That's weird. Let's just see. Okay, so it happens in this line here. See here. Okay, so the reason is that I changed the namespace, or the package name from EASV to Java Hands-On. So I'll just change it to Java Hands-On. That's why it's not working. So let's try again. Sorry about that. So now what we can see is that the list from the model is actually in here, and now nothing really happens. So the cool thing is that let's just put a single name into the model when we open it. So I'll still do that from the controller. Let's go here. So now I'm not changing the list, so I'm going to say model get names add, sorry, and then I will add Peter as the name. So if we open that, we'll see that Peter gets into the model. So the interesting part here is that you see we are updating the list that's inside of the model, but really if you look up here, we're not modifying the list of names itself. So we're not talking with the view here, we're talking with the model. So what we are basically doing here is the view sends an click event, the view sends an initialize event to the controller. It says, I'm finished, so I've been initialized, and then the controller says, okay, bind the model together with the view, like that. And then the controller says to the model, add the name Peter to the model, so it adds to the model, and then the view automatically gets updated. So this is why we can actually see that it says Peter up here, although we didn't really change or do anything with the list of names. So if we have code like this, we can actually add more persons here, like we can add another person here, Anders, and we can rerun the application. And now we have Peter, and we can put a lot of Anders in there. And again, remember, the magic is that I'm not touching the list of names. They are bound together now. Any change that I do to the model is automatically reflected in here. And that happens like that because the list names, the list view, when it has an observable list, whenever the list changes, the objects inside of it change too. So that is pretty nice. But in a lot of cases, this is not enough, and this is actually the reason why I made this video. In a lot of cases, it's not enough because if I change the value of something inside of the list, it will not update. So let me just explain that. So if I create a new Java class instead and I call it person, and this person here, I'm going to create an instance variable, private name, and should probably make it a string like that. And I will put the getters and setters by right clicking or alt insert and say getters and setters and click OK. And I get a getters and setters for the name of the person. If I go back now and then instead of having a list view of string, I'm going to change the list view here into person. And instead of and I need to change the model also to handle person. So we go into the model and we're going to main model, and we're going to change this into person like that. And of course we also need to return person, and we also need to set things with person here like that. Okay, that's it. So now we fixed that. So now it holds a list of persons instead of a list of strings. And this is often the case, something we have in object-oriented programming. Now, of course, we need to add a new person here. So new person, and then I think I'm going to put a constructor where I can name the person directly. So let me just go back to person again using the alt insert and then constructor and then OK. And I also want an empty constructor, so I'll do that like that. So we have empty constructor and as well, because it's okay to do without a name then. So now we added a new person, Peter. So now comes like an interesting thing. So let's try something here. Let's say new person. I'll just put that here. So we'll just see it's still working, but there's going to be a problem like this. So I'll click play. So now it looks weird, and if I click that person, we can see that it changes this value here. This means that it's different objects. So I'm creating a lot of different objects here. Okay. So this is not entirely working as intended. So there's an easy fix for this. So the list view is pretty simple. It just prints out the toString method of the object. So if I'm within the person here and there's no toString method, it uses Java's default toString. Again, we can use alt insert and we can override the toString method by selecting that. And it creates this weird structure which looks something like JSON. We only wanted to print out the name and nothing else really, like that. So if I change it into that, the toString method, it should print out the correct name here. Now it says Peter and Anders, like that. So that's it. So now we're creating a lot of different persons. So let's try something different. So instead of putting the persons directly into the main controller, I want to put them into the model. So I go into my controller first. I take this code here and this code here, and I move that into the model itself. Yeah. So what you would often have, you would have something like a database or something like that where you read the persons from. And I think we're going to do that. We're going to simulate that. But for now, I think let's just try to put it in here. So when I create the model, I can put it in here immediately. So we'll do that by just looking at where it's created and putting it in there. So I'll just do like this. Of course, we cannot access the model from here because we are inside of the model. So basically, we can just say names dot add new person instead, and names add new person. So now we're putting it directly in the model. We should be able to see that that it's still in here. So although now I'm not changing anything, again, I'm not changing anything with the list view, I just changed the model. So now we put data inside of the model. So normally we don't do like this. We have something like a database. So let's just make like I'll call this mockDB for a mock database. And I will then have something like a get all persons method. So I'm going to say public list of person and then get all persons. Let me just enhance that a bit like that. So, and I need to import that. That's Java util list basic list interface. So inside of a database, we don't have observables. That means that if there's changes to the database, there's no way of us actually knowing that. Or if there's changes to a file or anything like that. So what we need to do is here is we need to return something that looks like something that could come from a database. And that's not an observable list. So this would be just a list of persons. So this is what we're going to give to back here. So I thought I had it in the I had the persons here. So I'll just remove it from here and put it in the mock database. So I'll just create like a list of persons equals new, and then I'll create. There's no reason to create an observable list because I'm not returning something observable anyway. So I'll just create a new array list of persons, and then I'll add these two persons to the list, and then I will then return that list like that. So now we are imagining, instead of getting it from this weird class, we are actually getting that from a database. It could be something like that. So I go into our main model, and then I can have a method in here for load data into the model. So I'm going to say public void load from database. So this will load into the model from the database. And then I'm going to say I need to have access to the mockDB. I'll just create it right here. mockDB, call it db equals new mock database. And then I'm going to say this names. This is the observable list that I have in here. So I can't do like this. I can't say this names equals db, because this will give me an error, because we cannot cast like a see, I wanted to do like get all persons. We cannot cast a list into an observable list. That's simply not allowed. So it says it wants me to do a cast, but that will break everything. It won't work. So you can't really do that. So we need to change it somehow into an observable list. But we really don't want to change it, because if we could do this, let's say that we said something like fx collections observable array list, we could actually convert it like this. This would be problematic, because each time we load from the database, we override the observables on this list. In other words, if the link that we are creating here, when we are setting the items, where we bind the list with the model, the list on the user interface with the model, if we override the instance, in other words, if we do this here, create a new observable list, this observable list will not be bound to the user interface anymore. So this is definitely a no-go to create a new list. What we want to do, we want to reuse the same list that we have up here, but we can clear its contents. So what we do is we're going to say this dot names and then simply clear. This will delete all contents of the list. And then we will load the data inside of the list. So we're going to say this names add. And we see we can only add one person with the add method, but there's a add all, and that will be able to add like a complete list of persons like that. I forgot this. So I'll remove that. So this is the correct way to do it. So now I load from the database I just create a new mock DB. I clear the names and then I add all of the persons that I get from the mock database. And you can imagine I can easily change this into a real database that has the same method called getAllPersons. So it's kind of simulating that I have a database here. So let's try to run this code and we'll see that it works like before. It didn't. Okay, so I click the button, nothing happens. I'm not using the load from DB. So I'll go into the controller and just after clicking it's alive, I'm going to do the load from DB. I need to do that on the model, right? And that will load all the data into the model from the database. Like this. The interesting thing now is if I click it again, it will be the same. It will no longer just keep going. And that's because the load from DB will clear the list and then add these two persons from the mock layer like that. Okay, so that's interesting. I have a small side note for that. So one of the things that I told you before is that it would be a very bad idea to change the original observable array list here. Is after creating this model, we're actually binding it to the user interface. So we should never be able to change this instance here. We want this instance to be that one forever. This should be the correct one. So we actually have a cool keyword in Java for that called final. And Java can even do it like this, where we say that the observable list is final, and then we set it to this observable array list here. And if we try to change it afterwards by saying this names equals null, for example, we get an error saying that we can't do that because it's already been assigned to. We can only assign a final instance variable like this. We can only assign it once, and then it will be fixed to that instance forever. This also means that the error I was almost making here before, I wouldn't be able to do that because I cannot set that to a new array list. So we have this set names that we haven't used yet. So that is actually setting the observable list that we want. So we don't want to have this set names method because we never want to set it, and we actually also get the error because it's final now. So I think I'm just going to remove this part because we're never going to override our observable list like that. So now we are down to these basic methods here. So that's basically a model for the MVC. So if we just reiterate, so we have the view that creates an event, it sends it to the controller, and the controller sends that whatever it needs to do to the model, and the model will then update. So another interesting thing is that the model will also contact some kind of data access layer or maybe a layer in between that, and it will have some kind of data there, like a database or anything holding that data. So the view and the controller will only be in the graphical user interface part or the presentation layer of our system, and the only one talking to something below that in our system will be the graphical the model. And the reason why it's the model doing that is just because the model is the one who knows most about the data, so it makes most sense that it's the model that talks this way. Otherwise, we could make the controller do it as well, but if you try that, you can try for fun. You'll find out that it's much more hassle to do it with the model than doing it, to do it with the controller rather than the model. Okay. So the last thing I want to show with this was actually why I made the video, and that is that this looks all fine, but we're not actually changing anything right now. So now we load things. So maybe I want two buttons more than this. I want to try to delete something from the list, and I want to try something where I can add something to the list maybe, and then I want a button where I can update something, what we call CRUD functionality. So let me just open up the fxml file in Scene Builder and put some buttons in there. And I'm just going to skip that because the video is getting rather long. So if you don't know how to do buttons, maybe try watching some other videos. I'll just skip over this step and make it real quick for you. So that's it. Boom. I created everything. So I created a text field here called edt insert. I created another text field edt update, and I have insert here and button insert, button update, and button delete. So that's basically it. So what I want to do, I want to create events here so that when I click the insert button, I'll say click insert, and when I click the update button, I'm going to say click update, and when I press the delete button, I have click delete. So this is our basic functionality. And then I have this button. I think I'm going to call that load data from DB. So we'll just imagine we are kind of loading it from a database. Not the best GUI ever, but it will do. So I'll save this stuff, close that down, and I'll go into my main window fxml, and I'll just, there's these different action events. I'll just create that method, go back into the main window, click update, create that, go back, and create the last one as well. And I'm going to make the methods private like I did with the other ones and use the fxml so that the view can still access them. That's important, otherwise it won't work, of course. So now I have a click btn, that is the load from DB button. So when I click delete, what I want to do is I want to get the selected item and I want to delete that from the model. So I'm going to say list of names, and then it's called, let's get selection model. This is what holds what's selected, and then get selected item. This will get the first selected item of the list. So this is person that is selected on the list. And now that we have the person that's selected, we can delete that. So what we're going to say is model delete and then the selected person. So this is what the controller do. It finds out what was actually pressed here, and then it sends it to the model to take care of the data part of it. So I'm going to create that method here. So public void delete, then the selected person. So what I'm going to do, I'm saying this names remove the selected person. And that actually works out of the box. Let me show you. So if because now I'm changing the state of the list that I have inside of my main model. So if I load from the database and clicking Anders, for example, and then clicking delete, he's going to be removed immediately. Clicking Peter, he's going to be removed immediately. So that's pretty nice. So the delete part works, and I can reload from database, and I can just kind of keep doing stuff like that. So delete is easy here, and it works very well. Let's try to do the same with the insert. So we go back to the controller, and then when we try to insert something, we're going to create a new person. So I'm going to say person p equals new person, and then I'm going to take the data that I have from the edit. Did I add it up here? No, I didn't. So I just need to add, let's see, where is it? Edit update, create that field, and edit insert. And again, I use the private fxml notation. So what I want here is the edit insert. This is the one we're doing here. So the edit insert, I'm going to say get text. So this is actually creating a new person from whatever text is in the text box above the edit or insert button. And then I'm going to say model.add and then the person that I want to add. So I go here, create method, and then I say this names add the person P. Exactly the same here because our nice little observable array list has the same method, so it's really easy. If this was the real deal, we would also put some code here to update the database. So it both updates the graphical user interface and it updates the database. Maybe even we would try first to see if we could update the database and then only remove it if that succeeded. This is often the way we do it, to make sure that whatever we see on screen is the same that we actually save to the database, so someone doesn't think, okay, I removed that and then that person is still in the database. So, but that's for another video. So, but this would often be what we would put here, and that would be the same for add as well. So let's try. So let's try to add a person. We can load here and then put some name, and it goes in there, and we can delete that as well. And we can load from database, we can insert a lot and load, and we get back to everything, get back to the basics here. Because we're not saving anything to the database layer, although I insert something, it's only inserted into the table for now. So now comes the hard part. So the last part that we want to do is we also want so that when I, for example, click Anders here, his name will show up in this text box, and when I click update, it updates his name to something else. So let's try to do that, and that actually won't work, and I'll try to explain why. And this is the main purpose of this video, although it is quite a long video. So let's see, go back to the controller. So now we want to click update. So we want something like we want to get the selected person first. And it really should be very easy because we're going to say take the text box. Yeah, we're going to say whatever is in the text box, we're going to change the name of that person into that. So we're going to say edt update get text. This is the text in the text box. So we're going to say selected dot set name, and then we're going to change the name into whatever is in the text box. Okay. So this should be quite easy. Let's try that. So I'll run this. I will load from the database, pick Peter, and maybe we should, like, when I click it, we should update it here, but that will be for another video. So I'll just change the name to Peter instead of Peter, and I click update. And the weird thing is nothing happened. Did you see that? I updated, nothing happened. What if I delete Anders? Now it updated it. That's pretty weird, right? So let me try again. I changed this. Let's change it to something completely different. Okay, I click update. Now I delete the other person. Whoa, you saw that? It kind of updated afterwards. So I click Peter, update. Nothing happens. I click Anders, and now it finds out that it's changed. So it's a bit too late. It does find out, but it's a bit too late. And the reason for it is that there are no changes to the list at all. And while I'm not changing the list, the observable doesn't know that something has been changed. So if you remember, when we created the model, we created an observable list in here, and an observable list can observe on changes to the list, but it doesn't observe changes to the objects that's inside of the list. So in this case, we have this observable list that I call names, which is really a list of persons. And there's no way for that to know that I called the method setName, which is the method I used. There's no way, there's nothing in here that tells the list that I changed that. But we can actually uh, do that. We can actually make that work automatically. So let me show you. So we'll just remove the get and set name and keep the other stuff here. And then instead of using string, there's something in JavaFX using string property instead. And string property is actually observable. So what we would want to do is, let me just remove this part here and also the toString. We can just redo that. So I'm just using the alt insert or right click and create. And then what I want to do is I want to have the getters and setters for the string property. And I'll click OK. And now we can see it changes a bit. So we still have like get name and set name. And we use the set name, so that's nice. But there is a difference now. We don't just say like name equal and then put the string here. We need to use the set method for doing that on the property. Because now it's a property, it's not really a string. Okay, what does that mean? That means that now it's observable. When it changes, it should actually tell uh, whatever is outside, like the list, the list that is also observable. It should tell that observable list that I changed, so now you have to change too, right? I did have a couple of problems. I removed my constructor, so let me just redo the constructor. So let's see. It's not going to be like that. I'm going to say you need to put the string and string name. I'm going to use the method set name, and then we'll put the name here like that. So it just calls this method down here. Yes. That was the constructor. We also need the toString method because otherwise we won't get anything out. So I will just redo that by saying toString, and I'll just say name get. So it returns the name directly. So that's it. Now I refactored my business entity to be something called a bean, which is used for creating this overwatch on this string property here. So let's see if it works like this, because everything is the same. It's still called setName, but now there's a difference. When I call setName, it uses the property to set it, and the property has a built-in thing for looking at if there's any changes to itself. It also notifies anyone outside of it. So if it's in a list, it can automatically do that. Okay. So now I got a null pointer exception. So let's see, where is that? That is here. So the problem is that it's not enough here because string property is not like string that can be initialized. We need to say new, like let's just use the simple string property. That's the easiest one. So new simple string property, so it's not null, and then I just forgot that you have to initialize it, and we load the data and now it works. Let's change Peter into something else, and I click update and nothing happens. So still there's something wrong. There's still something that we need to do for this to work. So let's try to look at it. What's going on here? So toString, yeah. So basically, it should work like this, but the problem is that the list view is using the toString method, and the toString method is just returning a simple string. So we need to do something else for this to work, and let's just look at it. So we need to somehow make the list view not use the string directly, but we need it to use to be coupled with the string property. So let's just look at that. So something that's not very good here is that the list view simply doesn't do that. So when we do make changes here, it won't actually update it before we do anything like that. If we want that to happen, we need to do some kind of hack, because the list view simply uses the toString method to show whatever is there. So what we need is we need some a bit more capable kind of list for this. So what we can do instead is we can try to use the table view with columns, and I'll just show how to do that. So I'll just open up the FXML window or in Scene Builder and let's change this into a table view instead. I delete it and it warns me. So I write table view. Sorry. And I take the table view, put it in here. The table view is somewhat the same, but there is some differences to it, that it has columns, and these columns can be made to observe, and I want to show that. So right now we have this column here. We can delete that single column, so now we only have one column. So we're going to give this column here, we're going to give that a name, and we're going to call it like COL name. I'm going to call it that. And then the entire table, I'm going to call that TBL persons. So that is going to be the name column. We go to the properties and we'll just write, instead of C1 up here, I'll just write name. So that's the name of the person. Make this fill out like that. So that's it. And then we're going to change our code to reflect that. And let's see what happens then. So if we load it up now, nothing really happens because we are missing something. Like we get this error here. So if we look in here, we will see that now it doesn't have the same name. Now the table view is called TBL persons. So I have to change the controller so that instead of list of names, we're going to call it TBL persons. On top of that, we also need now to define, what does it say here? Yeah, okay. Also, we need to have the column name as a field as well. So I put that here. Make it private and put it here. And of course now this shouldn't be list view but table view. That's why it import class from JavaFX. It's important. So now this table column is actually, this call name is the column that we see in the table of persons. Now we should be able to open it. Do I still have some errors? Okay. So it says LST names. So of course we need to change that to table persons. Cannot find LST names. Basically it has the same features, it just so I just need to rename it here. And now we should be load data, and Now, the interesting thing about this is that it doesn't use the toString method to show them. So we can see, if you can't hear me, but I'm clicking now here and nothing happens, but I can click here and here because there are two items, but it doesn't know which property to actually show inside of this. Got to remember, you could have like dozens of columns here. So we need to set up the column to point to the correct property of the person. So if I say column name, and then we can use the set, let's see, set cell value factory, and then we need to put some code here that will enable us to set the cell factory for this. So what that means is we're going to say inside of our person, which property is this going to bind to? And we specifically want to bind it to the string property called name. And this is why we have the name called name property. So what we want is, we want inside of our, let's get it here, inside of this cell value factory, we want to be able to actually do that. So so we need to do something in here that will enable us to do that. So we can use something where we say new property value factory. And the property value factory, in here we will be able to say that it is the name that we want. So if I press play on this, it should actually be able to show us now. And let me explain why it actually works like that. So now we can see them. So the reason why that works is because the name that we have here, like where it says name, it knows that it's going to be a bean, a property with a bean, so it knows that it needs to say get name, like this. So it actually uses this method called getName. So if I misspelled name, and if I put any capital letters somewhere else, it would break. So it's a bit of a dangerous way to do it, but it actually works like that. So we create a property, something called property value factory, and now it knows that it needs to do like that. And if I then go and change the name here and click update, sad, that was just like coincidence. But if I click again, it will actually change here immediately, whatever, and update it like instantly. And that's because now it doesn't care anymore about the person's toString method. If I outcomment the toString method for the person, it will still work because it's really not printing out the string, the toString method. It's actually getting the name of the person instead. So it doesn't use that anymore. And the reason why I couldn't use that was because this is returning a string which doesn't have the property, so it can't be observable. So that's it. So if you do work with JavaFX and you want this to be working without any problems, you need to have a control in JavaFX which supports to have something like this where you can update. You can do it also for the ListView, but it's a lot more hard work because you have to override a lot of the built-in stuff into the list. So whenever you need something like this where it updates immediately, I would recommend you doing it this way here. Yeah, so let's recap for a second. So so the idea is we're using the MVC pattern, we're using properties on our business entity, which here is called person. We have our observable list. So we have observable properties on a person, which is in the list of person that is also observable, that is then connected to our view. So the view gets sent these events to the controller, which sends them to the model to get updates for the database and for the state of the view as well as updating itself. So The model actually doesn't know anything about the view, so although I have an arrow here, you could say that it actually doesn't really know about the view, but it is dependent on it though, because it's dependent through these observables here. So this is basically how that works. If you wanted to expand on this, you could write your own kind of observable part. So if you have a database or something like that, you could have something like a thread running in the background, querying the database to see if there are any changes in the database to your code, and then update the different properties accordingly, which would then update the user interface on, or if you have something cooler like a database that actually supports observing uh, data changes, if you can actually observe on something depending on which kind of database you're using, then you would be able to do something like this and make it very, very dynamic and very live, like we expect everything to do or to work today. So that's it for this video. It became a bit longer than I anticipated, but I also had a lot of things to cover, I think, and I wanted to do it um, in a tempo that was viewable as well. So I'll put this code on GitHub and put a link in the description. Bye.